recording. So
Okay.
we have two attendees.
All right. So good evening. It's Tuesday, August 11th. We're at the Portland Public Schools Operations Committee meeting. And we have first on the agenda, approval of the minutes from the meeting of March 5th, 2020. Do I have a motion? Mr. Burke, seconded by Ms. Victor. Are there any questions on the meeting minutes? Any corrections? Okay. Those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from March 5th, please indicate. Okay. Adam and myself, and Emily, are you abstaining?
No, I have a friendly amendment to make on the minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, we can go back to corrections then. Go ahead.
In the document, it talks about, in the very beginning, when we talk about solarize, it talks about something like a financial lady. Anyway,
does anybody know what is that?
So I got all that corrections from Derek Pierce. Yeah, go ahead.
Her name is Sarah LaChance.
Yes.
I think I updated that, and it is in the one that is currently on board docs. It has Lucia, Sarah, and Catherine Bursk are all.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I must have looked at an earlier version.
Well, that's okay, Emily.
And I just changed them like half an hour before the meeting.
Yeah, I said to Derek, I said, okay, well, who's the investor lady? So with the friendly amendment for Lucia Durania and Catherine Burst, the Deering High School teacher, and Sarah LaChance, green investor. And then also, Javier, if we could just add superintendent in front of your name. And then on the second paragraph, energy revision energy for a friendly amendment. Energy is spelled with 2 G's there. We just need to remove one.
I'm sorry, I missed that second.
Fourth line down, revision energy. I don't think it's spelled with a double G, but maybe.
Oh.
But that's okay. Okay, so with those corrections from Ms. Figdor and the friendly amendment, all those in favor, please indicate. Okay, passed unanimous with all those present. So moving right into this evening, we have first business item is deep dive. That kind of scares me. Deep dive into school reopening operations concerns. And Javier, do you want to kick that off?
So what we have planned for today is to just, I highlighted some of the key areas that I know from discussions with board members that you had questions about. And so I've asked our team to sort of address those questions. I also added to the agenda all of the questions that we recorded from board members at the meeting last week and highlighted the ones that I thought we would be able to address today as part of our discussion. So after these guys go and sort of walk through, you know, starting with facilities and then transportation and food service, those general areas. After each of them, we'll stop, let you ask any additional questions, and also reference the document to see if there are any other sort of facilities related questions that haven't already been addressed, or transportation related questions. Does that make sense as an agenda?
So Javier, real quick, Superintendent, we have an additional panelist. I don't recognize Jamie.
Jamie Kearney is our Director of Data and Technology.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, go ahead. You're starting with Steve.
Yep, so Steve, why don't you start by addressing the questions that are framed on the agenda, and then we'll slide over to any of the other questions that are sitting here on the recording of the questions.
Steve,
Steve, you're muted.
You're still muted, Steve.
I'm sorry about the muting. Listen, I'm still trying to pull those up on board docs.
So the first question is about custodial staffing, schedules, and protocols.
I can certainly speak to that particular concern, Steve, if you like.
Yeah, you can pitch in anytime you want here, Doug. But through the assessment process of looking at square footage and cleaning and the plan that we've built was an initial assessment of all spaces and a focus on impacts or mitigations of how we could fix areas in all top-down scenarios, from a full load of students in the schools to any of the options that may have been available to the superintendent and the school board. So through that lens, we began to look at all of the areas in conjunction with not only their physical space and their ability to be either ventilated or have an operational window, the parameters for building out and increasing frequencies of cleaning in those spaces from the top down. We looked at our scheduling potential for staff. What would be the need for a staff movement from a second shift to a first shift, applying it across the matrix of each and every space that we analyzed for loading our students in during the pandemic time. So in specificness to each school, there may be some different type of movement from the second to first shift, depending upon what level of loading in the schools we have. And that was born with the need to increase our cleaning frequencies, for which we have submitted a plan, at a glance, we call it, specific to each school, the methodology, the step through of every particular method of cleaning and protection for the coronavirus. So Doug can add some specifics on that if you have any other questions specific to FTE to square footage. It's still the same ratios, but it'll be in different shifting depending on how we load the schools and in what scenario.
Doug, you want to go ahead?
I just want to echo, what Steve says. We've had many conversations with the custodial leadership team. We've been working on various protocols through the summer, and enhanced methods and equipment, and gotten into the process of being prepared for what's ahead. And as Steve said, one of the primary goals, or I should say likely outcomes, is that folks on second shift will be reporting earlier, sometime on first shift, to augment the day shift person based on the needs of that particular school. And each school, as Steve said, is a little bit different or a little bit unique. Even our newer schools, when we look at it, you go to East End School, and a lot of the restrooms on the lower grades are actually inside the classroom. And at Ocean Avenue, they're outside the classroom. So there is a different challenge there that we'll face. A number of our schools have restrooms that are common use by all grades, or set by floor, a men's room and a ladies' room. And we will have to be hitting those on a different frequency than we used to. And then more than likely, it'll be in the ninth grade high school environment, probably 4 times while they're at school. And that particular cleaning will be significant enough that a restroom would probably be closed, say, 15 to 20 minutes between the time it takes to clean and what they call the dwell time for the actual product to take effect to do what we want it to do.
And while you're on that topic, can you go a little bit further into, because that was the third part of this, is the cleaning protocol. So you started now with the bathrooms, but I think people are interested in hearing, and you guys are working on a manual for your staff and so on, but can you sort of at a high level share with the board what the enhanced cleaning protocols look like?
Well, I think first it's important to understand that we've constituted what we call our Tiger team, which is some of our leaders and head custodians in the schools to help vet us through the processes of how products are going to be used in the future, from reusing rags to using a clean rag every time, just the very basics of cleaning, sanitization, and disinfecting areas. So the old idea of a dirty bucket and a mop is certainly not what we're talking about here. We have training at some of our vendors with equipment, and have designated specific labeled products that are EPA registered that will be applied in a step-by-step methodology that everybody is being trained on and talked to about and there's feedback loops, and there's good best practices that worked in the past that may not be what we're facing when we're cleaning a bathroom 4 times a day. So those are all outlined in that plan for cleaning. And specifically, we've consolidated our product usages around these products that are EPA approved for very effective killing of COVID. So when we didn't have a lot of disparate products in the school before this now, but what this has done is, again, it's raised the awareness of dwell times, for which Doug just spoke to. It does no good to use an expensive product if you're not letting it sit on the desktop the appropriate amount of time. So it's frequency of not only that area, but when do you return to do the clean wipe down of the desktop? When do you come back to do just a basic wash, clean, and then disinfect? So there's timing issues that we probably were not really adhering to in a real strict way. We were just cleaning the schools. Now everyone has an understanding of the value to the product, how it's to be applied, the PPE, the awareness to, hyper cleaning is what we're really striving to do on a daily basis. And and there's ideas that have come up from our staff on certain ways to cycle through a library as opposed to a particular classroom or a small learning area. Now we have a lot of sneeze guards and dividers in place. That's another thing that needs to be cleaned. And so everything has been really, really looked at hard, and we have a real consensus amongst our custodial staff and maintenance staff on just how we're going to step through this. So once we get rolling, we shouldn't be guessing as to how and what we need to do. We should be right there using the correct product, using the right dwell times, doing the closures where we need to hyper clean certain areas just in a regular basis to keep our frequency and our square footages in line with the loading of the buildings. So it's going to be a really, really different experience in the areas of disinfecting and sanitization rather than just broad cleaning.
And to continue on what the superintendent had suggested is that we do have, as Steve said, different protocols for different spaces, for those students that will be going, if they go to specials like art, music, and such, it has to be cleaned after every use because it's a different group of students that's going to be in and out of that space. Likewise, small group meetings are going to be after every use, and a conference or an IEP after every use. And then we'll have our traditional deep clean at the end of each day at each school.
And I think another thing we need to recognize that's really worked well, is going to stand us well through this increase of frequencies, is the great lines of communications that the head custodian and other custodians have with the administrators. So it's a very collaborative and flexible ability to clean when you just have an emergency in the school with a child that may be sick from up to their stomach or something. So these lines of communications now are much closer, much in tune to exactly what we need to do. And so it's going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge we're up to doing.
Any questions from anyone for Steve or Doug at this moment? Okay, go ahead. Oh, Emily, Ms. Victor.
I don't know if you're going to get to it, but I'm wondering, and you talked about it a little bit, but I'm wanting to know about additional protections and practices in the bathrooms. And maybe this is getting specific, but I understand that there are risks from open toilets, and I'm wondering, I don't think our toilets tend to have covers, and I'm wondering if we're doing anything to address that.
What would be your concern on an uncovered toilet?
I think there's some indication that that when the toilet flushes, it can transmit the virus. So I'm sorry, I'm not as well informed, and I can.
I can say that with toilets in general, whether they're lidded or not, they do create a vortex suction when they go down. You know, that's how gravity works there. But the idea of cleaning is sanitizing the handles, the flushometer valves, certainly the seat for standing COVID or formites that may be existing there, to disinfect and kill those. Then they wouldn't be transferred by hand-to-hand contact or physical contact. But I'm not aware of any aerosolization or propulsion from a toilet of COVID.
I'm just reading Harvard School of Public Health report, and they talk about how absolutely, as you're talking about, the touching shared surfaces in bathrooms can transmit COVID, but also breathing bioaerosols generated by toilet flushing.
Well, bioaerosols would be what was in the bowl going down.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I know that's how they're testing for COVID through widespread community to look at that sewage rates and so forth. But I don't have anything in mind that, other than the exhaust that we run in the bathrooms themselves, you know, exhaust fans are always pulling in all of our bathrooms like they do in your homes through the stack. I don't know whether that would still be the foot transmittal zone or what, but that's all we have for protection, is cleaning it and keeping the exhaust systems running.
I'm just pasting into the chat the specific recommendation from this Harvard School of Public Health report, which I can circulate as well. Except it didn't work. I'll just read it to you and then we can move on. It says, long-range airborne transmission risk in bathrooms may be further minimized by installing toilet lids, keeping lids closed when not in use, and encouraging students to close the lids before flushing.
It's been a long-standing, I think, recommendation prior to COVID because of just those things we talked about. I have no, other than the exhaust, we can put lids on. I don't know how many toilets we have that don't have a seat lid. It's something we can look into, absolutely. And, you know, we have to keep remembering that there's an element of the triangle I certainly forget many times, is a time to exposure rate that to transmit this virus. So maybe we're losing that leg of the triangle at some points where we start to prioritize it. I would just guess that it would be one of the lower risk areas if they're cleaned properly from the contact, rather than the bio vapor.
And Emily started her question before we went to the lids on the toilets, just asking for what are the protocols for cleaning bathrooms. So things like frequency and procedure and so on. Can you walk through that a little bit?
Well, firstly, they'll wash every fixture, touch fixture, the partitions, the sinks, the countertops, the floor, every touch point in short of cleaning the ceiling is going to be cleaned and disinfected at least 4 times a day. And there'll be hand sanitizers outside the bathrooms, you know, the gels. They'll be able to wash their hands with the towels, and there'll also be, like I said, the ventilation running. So they're going to be clean. They'll be the cleanest spaces of any place, really, if you think about it. Everything is cleaned. You'll see a difference in the frequencies, adding frequencies than what we're doing now. And in general, I think our bathrooms were pretty good, okay, not great. Many times the odors in the K-5 schools were tough to keep up with, but in today's environment, just by doing it 4 times a day, everything is going to be very clean, sanitized, and healthy. If COVID is, a child has COVID, it is expressed in that room, and it's then, say we know that, there's a whole different cleaning protocol to any space, but it would apply to a bathroom as well. Again, I kind of triangulate this from the idea of time of exposure, distance from exposure, whether you're wearing a mask or those type of protections individually before I look at the greater effect from doing that as opposed to not cleaning something or putting a toilet seat lid on something. So those exposure times, rates, and cleaning frequencies are going to give us the best environment in the school day to protect our kids using those spaces.
Thank you. Ms. Victor, you all set this time? Okay, thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? You can hear me? Okay. So I guess first, Stephen, on that last thing that you're saying, 4 times a day, all the bathrooms are going to be cleaned or the touchable surface is going to be wiped down. 4 times a day that applies across the district. Like literally every building you have this 4 times a day bathroom cleaning schedule, right? Did we, and I might have missed it when you first started talking, do we have additional janitorial staff or are we doing this with our current capacity?
With our current staff, we're still in the market for hiring, and we're hiring and we're advertising aggressively, and we just haven't seen a lot of candidates.
And how many positions short are we right now?
I believe 9.
That's correct.
Out of how many? Sorry.
No,
76.
One at a time, please.
I didn't get what those numbers were. I'm sorry. I was talking to myself.
We're nine positions are unfilled, and we've been in the 9 to 7 position unfilled for a couple of years.
Total of 76, is that I think what Mr. Sherwood said?
Yeah, roughly, yes.
Thank you.
And these positions would be like I'm just trying to think if there's like different types of janitorial staff, or like when we say 9 positions, am I right to assume, oh, this is 9 extra sets of hands to help with this 4 times a day of cleaning? I guess what I'm saying, specifically the additional janitorial staff that you're talking about is for cleaning purposes. Like there's no other side jobs that these 9 positions are going to be doing.
No, Roberto. All of custodial staff will be primarily they're cleaning. Maintenance work will be done by our maintenance staff. We have tried to cross-train and cross-pollinate where they have done a very good job on picking up the smaller things. But we're kicking off to get back into school, so our primary focus is knowing what we're going to do from the moment 2 hours before kids hit that school to 2 hours after they leave, and we can move staff as we see this go, either from schools to schools. We have a flexible staff. I would love to have the 9 filled, absolutely. Then, the more hands, the merrier. My bigger fear is not that we don't have the 9, is that we lose more of what we have.
And let me just, because we also have members of the public attending, I think it's important for people to understand, I think the board knows this, that, again, as Steve said, that we've had those vacancies and those positions are hard to fill. And that the way that we've done the work is through overtime pay. So we consistently go, way over on overtime and obviously way under on personnel. So I think that just so that everybody understands how that works.
Yeah, appreciate that. And the word that I couldn't find when I was asking my question was the maintenance staff. I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about janitorial staff and not maintenance staff, but I think Steve clarified that. The only other thing I was going to say to Emily's point, and this is more like a side truth, I've always, I remember this being drilled to us that you never use toilet paper to blow your nose, precisely because of what happens when you flush the toilet. So as soon as she started mentioning that, I said, oh, I remember being told, like, that's the reason why public bathrooms have covered toilet paper, not so that they don't steal it, but so that it prevents the splashing to get them saturated and obviously infected substances.
And there's always an engineering degree within the volume of expulsion on the age of the plumbing hooked to it and the length of the run. like there are certain schools that we have in our district that does have a more bio-explosive flush than others. But it's a simple thing we can correct. I just had not quite thought about the toilet seat yet, and we'll get there.
You all set, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, there's a joke there about a guy forgetting about the toilet seat, but
Yeah, I know.
thank you, guys.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Burke.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the thousands of details you have thought through. And in the article that Emily shared, it just notes that there's other potential solves for that issue, like staggering a bathroom use, and in addition to the cleaning protocols and that sort of thing. So I feel confident you'll think about that as you go down the list of the thousands of things to consider. My question's on the staffing. I'm just not entirely clear. You talked about that you're looking at load volumes of schools and perhaps collapsing second shift into first shift in order to meet the cleaning frequencies. And in the past, if we had 9 unfilled positions and you could do overtime, I understand how that plays out on a schedule, but can you tell me when you do your schedule chart with basically everybody collapsing into a first shift instead of first and second shift, are there gaps in that schedule where you do not have the staff person to meet the need of that building load?
I think we would never schedule that way. We're not at that point. I guess if the 9 that we're missing, we would certainly love to have filled. But we are in a position now where through some efficiencies that we'll put in place and a different approach, I think, in allowing our head custodians to be have more autonomy to how they run things. Things are smoothed out. It's certainly a smoother working custodial staff, but even with the square footages as we still remain at, COVID or uncovid, we were producing a really clean product. So if we look at and project losing more, then the collapsing of second shift to first shift would be, in my estimation, would say we would be in a higher community load of COVID, and we would be looking at maybe different loading of buildings. So my planning would be staff-wise is to collapse to where we're going to be from what's driving us to be there, and that would be the an uptick in COVID, and then a less use of the buildings, and also certainly trying to hire as many as we can put back into our workforce. But there'll be no areas in our schools where they are not appropriately clean for our students. If there are, I'll report to the superintendent and we'll make the decision not to have students there.
Yeah, okay, so pretty plainly, you have the staff you need to fulfill the protocols that you've described to us thus far in the buildings per the projected use of the buildings in our
I do
scenario.
feel comfortable where we're at right now, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I interrupted
No,
Superintendent.
No, that's fine. I was gonna try to see if there was another way to attempt to answer your question, but if you're satisfied, I'm just gonna leave it.
Okay, thank you.
And Doug, I think Doug's hand is up too.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate when we mentioned about second shift collapsing the first, it's not that everybody's working 2:30 to 11 is going to be starting to work at 6. The issue will be coming in to meet the need. So you'd still have the person coming in at 6, but maybe the first person from second shift doesn't show up till 9 o'clock when I'm cleaning that first bathroom. And the fact that the hours may or may not be shorter during the day or less activity after school, normal school hours inside the building, we'd be able to get at some of those locations earlier in the day that we may have in the past. So we can still focus on that end of day cleaning with the same staff.
Okay, that's all helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, I don't know how much of your facilities presentation you have still, but want to keep going?
Yeah, so now we're gonna, if you're done with custodial, then we could shift into what are the improvements that are that are planned, and which ones have already been done and what's the timeline for it.
Go ahead, Steve.
The elevated, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Harvey here said.
The second question, Steve, the facilities improvement scope and timeline. What's been done, what's planned, what's already been done, and what's the timeline for getting the rest of it done?
Okay, so what has already been done is sneeze guard production. You all know what sneeze guards are. Our maintenance department has manufactured many different prototypes and have produced over 500, 600, 800 of them and continue to do so. We've ordered enough hand sanitizer touchless stations, over 750 of them, to be deployed in classrooms where there are no sinks to start. If a kid at K5 sink room has a sink, it may not have a hand pump right away. We may need to buy another couple hundred, but we have enough to deploy through all the classrooms, and we're putting them up as we speak, and they may already be done. We've got all of our signage in the warehouse, so to speak, ready to be deployed. Social distancing signage, flow signage through the schools, working with the administrators to work with them on a flow path through the building, on how they see their students moving through the building. So we have all that signage and designation in place. We have PPE. We have 11 pallets we received from the state with hand sanitizer, cloth masks, the gloves are coming, gowns are still 2 weeks out. So we've got an extraordinary amount of PPE right now from the state, with the exception of N95 masks, they're saying next week, and the surgical gowns. So PPE, we're looking good on PPE. We've had other expenditures on PPE that have brought our levels up. We've purchased, as you know, electrostatic sprayers. The state is asking us to get better training or certification in those, which we'll move forward on with that for the use of that product. We've also have ordered and should be in either today or tomorrow UVC light 2x4 light. They're not light fixtures. I use it because they're designed like a light fixture, like you see in a classroom, a trofer, they're called, 2 foot by 4 foot. These are solid panels with an enclosed UVC light source that's mounted up into the ceiling. You don't see it, it's encapsulated, it's insulated, and it has a inlet and an outlet with a small motor, and it pulls in 100 and 200 square foot CFM per minute. We're installing them at all of the nursing areas. So if a child goes in that area and may be expressing COVID, these can actually kill the COVID virus. It's one of the things that everybody agrees upon, is that the UV light can destroy the virus. So in those high risk areas where children may be or staff may be, we have that application there. We have ordered 60 HEPA filter units, portable HEPA filter units that are due in any day. The rationale behind these portables were that in interior areas without windows or no good or any ventilation, it would be a proper thing to put in at 3 microns. So if I don't want to get too technical, but if you cough out some COVID, it's 5 microns. A HEPA filter can filter up to 3. And if it goes beyond fomite to aerosol, then you're talking 1/1000th of a micron. So they are effective, and they're used in 1,500 square foot for the HEPA, 750 square foot for the air purification and ionizers. So that gives us a portable method of increasing the air quality, the indoor air quality, in areas where they're not getting either access to a window or a direct implication from ventilation. And also, I'm sure, I think you may be aware that we've have 137 windows being manufactured in Massachusetts to replace at least having one operational window in some of our classrooms that have no ventilation during the 1839 edition. The windows were put in the 80s, but it would take Javier, myself, and Doug and Roberto to open them. So at least they can be opened, and we'll get them open if we need to get them open. Well, at least there's going to be one that the teacher can open and easily get open and So we're taking advantage of what's available to us and in the areas of ventilation and let's say indoor air quality. So have I missed anything, Doug?
Yeah, what about the ionizer?
Oh, sure. In Reiki, there's a special application, and maybe even not special to Reiki, but there's a product that I've researched that is the size of a softball that will go into unit ventilators. And many of our classrooms have unit ventilators throughout the district. And they generally provide anywhere from 650 CFM of air, heated or outside air, depending on the season. They're ionizers, and what they are is a simple cold plasma generator that produces through 24 volts a negative charge across the face of the air entering, which simply ionizes the water in the air, which we can talk about humidification later, which I'm really happy to do. And it's a different, but it works this way. It takes the water, H2O, and it releases the two O's from the H, and it then looks for a positive particle in the air, in the environment for which it's expelling to. So we have allergens, we have molds, we have viruses, we have pollutants. They're all positively charged. Okay, so this ionization creates a attraction to rejoin the O and the H together again. And when that happens, there's a reactive, I won't call it heat, but we can use that term in a general sense. It kills those products. All right, so if a COVID virus was holding on to a mold or a pollutant in this decharging and recoupling of this chemistry, it being the host would be taken or destroyed with, but it's not really going out looking for COVID. It'll increase the air quality immensely, and it will give us protection in those areas. So long story short here, there's 36 ventilators that we can put them in at Reiki. They're $750, little transformer, another 12. I get them installed in all the Reiki, and they also are produced in 1800 to 2000 CFM, which basically means is we can look at this technology as how we can implement it into the main distribution trunks of all of our schools that have large air handlers.
Can you go through that? I think more so than how they work, I think for people to understand where we are deploying those and what the timeline is for that. And then the windows as well.
I expected to get a number, a Carter number today. We're still working on it. But I did at 750, 445 unit ventilators in the district and 101 direct air trunks through all of our schools, including the new schools, which have humidification systems, would bring us into the neighborhood of 702,000 to install them all.
Steve, can you talk about too, we've had some emails about teachers that have classrooms, for instance, Portland High School in the basement, Longfellow in the basement, and they don't have opening windows. So we don't have some meeting spaces that have windows that will open. So what are we doing about the people that are in the basements?
Well, they'll have a window that opens. That's part of the windows that I talked about earlier. There'll be no classroom space that doesn't have a window that is operable to open.
So all basement windows.
What about the classroom spaces that don't have windows? I think that's what Thompson is asking. And I think you touched on it, but if you could just go back to the.
I didn't hear about the basement because I don't think there are windows in Portland High, are there, Javier or Superintendent?
What I was speaking to, I think, when I said, when we were looking at portable units, areas that had no windows or no ventilation, where there's smaller class or rooms that were taken over due to the necessity of loading of the schools that were never engineered to have, there were closets. If we have a classroom, when you use the terminology classroom, to me, and I've had to adjust this in my own mind, it certainly has a window. they weren't designed as classrooms, the rooms that I'm talking about. However you use them, if they didn't have ventilation and they didn't have a window, they were a closet or they were a storage room. Classrooms were designed with windows. So I get lost in that terminology sometimes when we're speaking about how we use rooms as classrooms. But if there are classes being held in rooms, the only options we do have, and it's the recommendation that we've started with from the foundation, is that we wouldn't have kids in classrooms that didn't have windows. But in areas like Reiki, when we use portables, there's no walls, there's no partitionable classrooms. But that's where we would use the HEPA filter and the ionizer. And with realization that, or even a fan, but even with the realization with the sneeze guard and that vector I keep losing is time. How long are you gonna be there? How long, you know, what's going on there? And then we can deploy what we have. It's not like we're not gonna have this to deploy. It's gonna be, why are we in there and how long are we in there and should we be in there in the first place?
So the concern raised from the Portland High School band director, music director, that she's in the Portland High School basement, no windows. Well, she'll be moved to another space within Portland High because she does not have windows. Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm not sure that specific area doesn't have windows. Doug, doesn't the band area have windows? I know we did a mold review in there a year and a half ago. I thought I had windows.
And we do have windows in the music performance area, but not in the piano room at the back.
Okay, so we'll look into that.
So I mean, your point's well taken. There are ways that these schools are being used that, as much time as I have spent on this, I can tell you there are places that are being used in schools that I have no idea. And someone will come to say, well, my room doesn't have a window. And you'll say, oh my God, a classroom doesn't have a window. Classrooms were designed with windows. We have people in places that weren't designed as classrooms when they were built. So to flesh out that part of what we're doing was in the small group areas as we defined in our whole plan. That custodial staff was in, myself, identifying every space. So it would be surprising to me, like Deering is the same. They have, the big band room has windows, but they have a room that's an orchestral room or something. It has no ventilation, has a door and a window that was placed in. It was built in way further along than, but so to use that room, again, I would say, let's look at it for how long would you be in there? HEPA filter, air ionizer, and sneeze guard, and social, wear a mask, social, you know, that.
Okay, but at Portland High School, for instance, Steve, I don't want to keep going on that one, but we have plenty. I think we have, from our study that we did, we have some space at Portland and Deering that we can reallocate, I would assume.
Yeah, and I think
those back rooms.
that's a process that's ongoing now, is the evaluation of the space. Okay. With that as a basic guideline, that you have, you know, a window for a classroom in ventilation. And those in themselves are what classrooms generally are designed to have. And we're trying to cover the spaces that don't have those. And even those that have those, we all know what the transmissibility of COVID is. And we all have read about what goes on and what doesn't. We're increasing the air quality. There's not a whole lot outside of the UV light that can actually kill it. So we need to, how long we're gonna be in there, guarding with sneeze guards, fan ventilation, HEPA cleaning and ionization of air. And then really looking at the structures of the need to use that area to what may be the community risk level in COVID.
Okay.
So it's going to have
we're gonna look at classrooms that we have in closets, and we'll look at back rooms and all of that, just to assure some of these teachers that do, like LISF, they have a hallway where they have a classroom.
Yeah, and I'd like to say too, is that we don't, if a teacher asks us to help them with something, we do it. We don't say, no, you can't do that. If they need to teach in it, we'll make it the way they can teach in it. If we know that we have the conversation that after we say, yeah, we can do this, we do that, and we look at each other and they go, you know, I don't think that's a good idea. Then we'll find another space.
Okay, I'm just asking that we be proactive in that.
Yeah, very proactive.
Thank
Yeah.
you. All right, so you want to keep going, Steve? I don't know what the next question is. Superintendent?
I see a couple hands up. Ms. Figdor has her hand up, and I think that's it now.
Okay, I'm going to go to Doug first, and then I'll go to Ms. Figdor because I think Doug wants to do a clarification, if that's all right with you, Emily. Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, good evening again, everyone. Just for information purposes, it's kind of an odd combination, but even though Portland High is our oldest high school, it does have a full up building-wide ventilation system, zoned system. So they are getting air circulated. And as Steve said, as we introduce ionizers to the system, we should see significant improvements there. Whereas the original 1929 building at Deering High School is where we're having the windows and the lack of mechanical ventilation that we do need to address directly and now, and are.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. Ms. Figdor?
Is it possible to get a list of which of the schools has a mechanical ventilation system and which doesn't? Just so we're more informed about kind of the range of what our buildings look like as a baseline.
I think I understand your question. I think all of them have a mechanical ventilation system. Some are mostly univentilators and not digitally controlled, but they all have ventilation. Certain areas of the building may not have been ventilated, but they all have a system in place.
Okay.
And I try to, I look at a front end, it's called, it's a computer informational center on all of our HVAC. And it shows every school, it shows every air handler, every RTU, and all of its operational parameters. That's what we call digitalized systems. So I can look at it on the computer and I can monitor it. It can go into alarm, and we know what the status is from dirty filters to this. But our schools that are not, that are using unit ventilators with a thermostat on the wall, that are not digital, we don't see that equipment that way. So most of our schools that have, all of our schools that have gyms and cafeterias have ventilation, maybe an RTU on the roof, or roof package, or air handler, or some type of air exchanger for the larger areas. And then they rely on what you see underneath the windows in the classrooms are those, what we call univents, which are taking outside air and either heating it or just bringing in outside air from a thermostat on the wall. So that, all of our schools have ventilation. Different ages, different control processes.
For my minutes here, and just to reiterate for everyone, I heard you say that there were 445 unit ventilators and 101 of the mechanical, sort of the other systems, the larger ones.
That's right. Yeah, and to give you a timeline on this, I'm expecting pricing from the Illinois Mechanical I dealt with the other day, starting with Reiki, can be, as soon as we get the pricing and see what it is, go ahead and take it out to bid. What process do I need to do to turn it over to get them installed? District-wide, I don't know if we don't want to take a step back here and start with Reiki and see what kind of performance we get, and take a small step backwards, because our newer schools, again, it would only be 3, maybe 6 trunks that would have it. I mean, it's not a big maintenance issue and cost down the road to maintain these things, but they do jump in price from a unit ventilator to a 2,000 square CFM trunk unit, almost twice. But I think moving ahead in any scenario, COVID behind us or what have you, it's a technology that's been around for 12, 14 years, not fully embraced, not really, because of its expense, but moving ahead, it can only enhance our air quality, indoor air quality throughout our district.
Ms. Figdor has a follow-up question. Steve, Ms. Figdor, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have my additional questions are around the timeline. It sounds like this has been something we've been considering over the last few weeks. And Steve, I think I heard you say that you were working on bids but hadn't gotten them yet. So what's our best sense of the timing of at least getting them installed at Reiki? And then my subsequent questions are around the HEPA filter units. Are those already, or do we have those already? And lastly, on the UV panels, where I think I heard you say that they're going to put them in higher risk areas, but can you talk a little bit more about where we're using those and the timeline for getting those up and installed as well?
So good, all good questions, Emily. We were promised delivery last week on the UV light. We have not received them as yet. Our electrician calls them daily. We're promised the delivery this week or by the end of this week of the 60 HEPA filters and the air filters. So they're all paid for. They had to change color 5-6 days ago from white that I ordered to sand. So they're on their way. We'll have them before school. Now with the ionizer, what are you?
Just, I think that Emily also wants to know where the UV lights are actually going to be placed.
The UV lights are going to be placed in the nursing areas, okay? Located within the proper space that the nurses have in the schools. So we have all the wiring in place. Once we receive them, they'll go in. And that to me was the ideal place to start with the UV light, is where isolation may occur or where someone just plain old sick goes. But that's where they'll go. There's a different line of product in this as well that do have lights. Just as you go into the classroom and you see the light harvesting trophers overhead and they dim, and they make these with UV compartments as well. That's something that we could look at again as we move through and how long this is going to go. But none of this is inexpensive. And they have a maintenance cost. The UV lighting is expensive, and they have filtration to filter pads that need to be changed every 6 months. So they're medical grade. They're medical grade equipment.
And then thank you for all that. And then what about the portables? So first question is, clearly we still have portables at Presumpscott. I believe that we're using them as swing space during the construction at LISAF. So if that's the case, how are we making those spaces safe? And then I guess it's maybe connected to my understanding of what's happening at Reiki, whereas, and maybe Reiki's in kind of a situation of its own given the lack of walls, but it sounds like at Reiki, the custodial staff and lead teachers are shifting around the spaces that we use as classrooms in order to ensure that there's good ventilation. So how are we addressing the portables?
Well, the modulars have air conditioning window bangers. And you open another window and you don't have the just straight recirc. Again, it's social distancing, wear a mask. There's no ventilating system that can reduce all the risks. We can improve the air quality, and we can make that the equity of the school district, that all of our equipment is running and properly ventilating and the filters are clean. The same risk is in a modular. We don't have a modular that doesn't have windows or doors that open. There's nothing unique to the modular in its structure that makes it any different than a regular classroom, Emily. So we wouldn't do, I don't know of anything special we would do other than make sure, due to heat in the summer in a mod, right? They trap the heat, the roof's lower, there's just not, we just need to have the proper distancing of the kids in there. A window open and an air conditioner running at the same time is fine. Ventilation, it's all about the air exchange rates, right? It's how much new air can you get in every hour in volume that's in that space. So that's really what we're looking for effectiveness to help reduce the risk.
That's good to hear about the ventilation. And is the square footage, what I remember is a square footage of at least, the Presumpscot modulars appears, again, what I remember to be smaller than a typical classroom. Is that the case? And if so, are we adjusting the maximum number of students we'd have in a modular classroom?
We would use the same pattern we're using throughout the district. Yeah, the 6 foot for if they were going to eat their 3 feet separation. So I don't know how many students they would have had in that modular specifically, but we certainly will follow that seating pattern right now in the COVID. In your question about Reiki, there is a lot that we've talked about a Reiki, and I was just there, spent hours again in there the other day. I think if you go in just use your senses as a human and walk through the doorways and feel the draft and feel the velocity that you feel when you go between the wall and the brick section, just in its natural convective state, that in dilution, in its delusion.
How do you notice these things? I don't.
It is a big open school that can dilute a lot of volume in exchange that other schools can't, that are built-in walls. So direct interaction with that process of transmission with COVID is more concerning to me rather than the 50-foot ceiling in the petitioned walls, because there's a vective current going there that's in that big space that's discharging as much as it's taking in. Almost like a whale when it comes up and it's eating the baleen opens up, it's just filtering everything.
Quick
Thanks,
question.
Steve. I'm going to go to Adam. Go ahead, Javier.
Just, I don't think that you answered the HEPA air filters, the 60, where are they going?
They were going to go into areas to augment air quality where there was no windows and no mechanical ventilation.
So back to Board Member Thompson's question about the piano room or something along these lines, that would be a place where that would go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that clarification. Ms. Vigdor, you're all set?
Yes, I do still think, I guess I still would appreciate knowing where we have the digitally controlled mechanical ventilation systems, where we don't. Because my understanding, Steve, is that there is a benefit of your being able to see all the data, right? So is the supposition is that those, that those systems are going to be more effective.
Absolutely.
Are we able to provide a list that says these are the schools that have Univent systems, these are the schools that have, whatever the other systems are?
Well, yeah, I can get you absolutely. I look at it, it's a long list. I tried to copy it off the front end, and it's a software program. It's just tons of information. Yeah, I get the list. The Univent, our new schools have Univents, but they're digitally controlled. Our new schools have Univents that are CO2 controlled and modulated. We have schools like Longfellow, which has Univents that are not digitally or CO2 controlled. So if they're not in the program that I look at, I don't have that information, but I can tell you, certainly give you a list of where they are.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to Mr. Burke.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, something I just don't know what the protocol is, and if you could say for attendees when their answers might be, or questions might be tended to. I see some coming through, and I don't think we've shared with them when they could anticipate participation in this meeting. Okay. And then for Steve, I think I have a couple basic questions. First, one of the recommendations is just with, I'm getting a little lost in our terminology. I'll just use HVAC systems, that the dampers be open to cycle in fresh air instead of recycling indoor air. Is that one of the protocols for what we're doing, is to change any such settings so that we're cycling in more fresh air?
Yes. And remember, when we use terms like 100% in damper positions in mechanicals, you're really getting 75%, maybe 68%. The dampers don't fully flap open, but we do control occupancy schedules. We have the ability to start and stop equipment that is digitalized, and also the ability to make it run 24/7 in what we call full outside air mode. So in the reality of full outside air mode is it can't take any more outside air, and it's always recirculating a certain percentage of inside air. So to answer your question, yes. And then with schools that don't have digital controls, we leave the univents running 24/7. So we're not going to be applying any setback schedules, any turning off of any of our ventilation equipment during this period of time. It's going to ventilate and run 24/7. The issues we'll deal with when we get to that time is when the weather changes and it gets colder.
Yeah. So we need more solar panels. We'll get there. Yeah.
We could use them now.
Yeah. And then just what's the timeline for the window install? I heard you say they're being built in Massachusetts, but when are they targeted to be installed on the buildings?
We have an agreement with the window installer, Rich, that they'll be completed, substantially completed on, I believe it's September. What was the date, Doc? They'll start as soon as they get them, and they're making repairs now to areas where as the windows begin to come off the production line in Massachusetts, they'll be installed as we go. But I think our agreement said September at the latest to be done. Is that correct, Doug?
The actual contract reads the final completion date of October 16th, with any windows that are not functioning currently that need to be functioning for the start of school will be made functional until the new window arrives and is installed. And I say that somewhat availably, and I didn't mean to necessarily, but we have 75 windows going to Portland High as an example, and where there's only, the 9th grade attending, so there might be some rooms that are less important than other rooms, so we'll get on top of those 9th grade classroom windows first. And if we can't get them physically replaced, then we will be repairing a window in each room, so there is at least one operable in every room.
Great. So yeah, I'll just repeat it back to make sure I understand that the contract says there will be an operable window in every classroom that is being used by the time school opens. That might be an existing room that's been adjusted so that anybody can open it. But then by October 16th, the new window that we've purchased would be installed. Yeah, okay. And then just because it is a good clarifying question that came in, for the school-based health centers, is that a place where the UV unit would be installed in addition to nursing stations, or is that outside our purview? Is that on somebody else's?
I had a conversation.
List?
I did have a conversation with Kathy Elvis with the city about this product, but I made no arrangements to place UV in there. But
Okay,
I did
thank
talk
you.
to the city about it.
And just, I don't know if you're aware of this, that is not a city. Greater Portland Health is a separate entity, so they are not run by the city. So a conversation with Kathy Elvis makes absolutely no difference in terms of that. So I don't know what the arrangements are for Greater Portland Health, and it is something that we can ask them, but that's not our purview.
Oh yeah, she wanted to put it in John's office. That's right. That's where it was going to go.
Burke, are you all set? Okay.
Yes, I believe I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as then we have more attendees now, and I have another commitment I have to log off for, so the superintendent's going to take over from here. And your question, Mr. Burke, in regards to public participation, after we finish each section, whether it be facilities, food service, or transportation, he'll evaluate at that time about public comment. We have a lot of coverage tonight to go over. And we still have 2 more presentations up after facilities and a whole slew of questions. So as time permits, but for those that are here from our attendees, if your question does not get to be asked, I know Mr. Burke just asked one of the panel, the attendees questions, so thank you for doing that. Then we will have an FAQ posted as well, so we can ensure that we cover all of the questions. But again, we have a lot of coverage tonight, so. With that, I'm going to turn over to the superintendent and thank you all, and I'll be back in touch.
Okay, so I think we're done with facilities. So I think we can move into transportation, which is on the agenda. Mr. Burke.
Thank you to Steve and Doug and the whole team for all of this incredibly complex and detailed work.
Just to clarify, does outdoor learning spaces fit within facilities, or is that going to be covered in another section?
We don't have anything to say about that at this point. I think we were getting points today, and then I don't know, Steve and Doug, if you guys, I know Doug, you were in a conversation last week with those folks. If you've got something to add to it, great. If not, it would
only that we are still looking at the potential for a minimum of 2 outdoor locations at each school. The Portland Society Architects have done their site assessments, are turning the information over to their coordinator, AD, and that we're hoping, if things go as we had planned, that 1 or 2 of the possibilities for East End would be presented during the walk later this week. So that would be kind of a first look for everyone, including ourselves. But yes, facilities are involved, Portland Trails is involved, as well as City Parks and Recreation from a standpoint of fully assessing each of the options coming forward.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys, don't go anywhere because we may be coming back to you, but let's move to transportation now. So, Eric, can you see the questions? You want me to read them to you?
I think I have them in order.
Maybe I'll read them to you so that people who may not have the document open can see that. So we were going to start with cleaning protocols and distancing on the buses. So just like, what is the bus experience going to be like?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think initially, just starting out with that, we were doing this at a minimum level before March 15th. And so we were doing some of these cleaning protocols back then, but at a much lighter level. And so what you're going to hear today is at a ramped up level in comparison. So I think, just some basic safety statements is one, that our capacity is going to be limited to ensure the 3-foot social distancing can be maintained with masks on. Obviously, if that needs to move up to 6 feet, we can go there. But as far as what I'm understanding right now, it would be 1 per seat. I'll get more specific on that. Students, we know, will board from back to front and front to back so that there's less movement as far as loading and unloading onto the bus. We also know that students will be wearing face covering, cloth face covering. And if there are students that don't have any, that will have spares on the buses to supply those needs. Also, the interactions between staff and students we're going to be as socially distant as possible while being realistic about what's needed on a bus. I mean, we're in a moving classroom without much space. The drivers and assistants will both have face masks and face shields, or face coverings and face shields and gloves. And that will be a way to stay above reproach. And then lastly, just a basic safety statement is that we're going to have the windows open while we drive down the road to keep air circulating. And the nice thing about these buses is that we can have windows open and heat running, even if it's in the colder seasons of time. So moving on to cleaning, just kind of on top of that safety basic safety or macro look is cleaning is we're going to have a driver clean supply kit for every driver or every vehicle. And so there's going to be 2 spray bottles in that kit, one for cleaning and disinfecting and one for windows. So every driver will have their own carrying kit that will be in the first seat behind the driver. And we'll be able to supply them with the necessary cleaning and disinfectant and window cleaner in that package. They'll also have a microfiber cleaning cloths, gloves, extra masks for students, and then hand sanitizer. And so we're going to supply all those and restock those so that our drivers feel comfortable and our families are taken care of as best possible. And then moving to bus cleaning rhythms, we're going to have kind of 2 layers. One we were doing at a micro level that will be ramped up. 2 is a new move for us. And I'll just say that right now we're going through a massive deep clean while things have been slowed down and doing food delivery. Seats have been flipped up. We've been cleaning underneath seats, in seats, roofs, floors, front to back, and everywhere in between to make sure that we can have the best cleaning and disinfectant process going forward. So our cleaning rhythms will be 2 stages. One will be in between and after each bus run. So there is your elementary 1, elementary 2, your high school, your middle school. In between each one of those runs or tiers, does everybody understand what that means? Runs or tiers?
I think it might
That we will
helpful
clean
to,
all.
Eric, maybe just spend a couple minutes. Don't assume that people understand it. There are a lot of people who, I don't know. I think Ms. Figdor does. I don't know that Mr. Burke does. I don't know that Ms. McLucas does. And I don't know that the attendees do. So maybe it would be helpful
No problem.
to just spend a minute on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, our tiers are set up in elementary tier 1 is at 7:45, and we'll get to the specifics of what schools that means here in a moment. And then elementary tier 2 is at 8:45. And then you've got high school at 9:30, which is technically tier 3. And 15 minutes after that at 9:45, you have the middle school. And that would be our AM runs in the morning. So in between, from after we drop the students off at 7:45, we're going to make sure that we hit all commonly touched surfaces, wipe down, and make sure we disinfect any spot like handrails, coming in and out the seats. We'll have a handful of minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, to make sure we do a good wipe down before the next run of students, which would be for the 8:45 tier 2 elementary students. So there will be 1 student group getting on the bus. Those groups will get off. The next, we'll do a quick clean. Next group of students, continuing on. And then upon the completion of our AM morning runs, so all of those bus runs, and at the end of all of our PM runs, around 4:15 in the afternoon, 3:30 to 4:15 in the afternoon, we will be doing a deep clean. So that will include kind of 3 stages. We'll first sweep the bus, and then we'll clean all the commonly touched spots on the bus, and then we'll spray down or we'll disinfect through a sprayer that will take care of the rest of the bus. And so we have kind of a micro cleaning about 3 times in each AM and PM, so a total of 6 times a day, and then a macro level cleaning twice a day. Does that make sense? So there's a total of about 8 times a day that they'll be cleaned. And I'm sure our drivers, since they care about each other and their students so much, there's probably going to be a little bit more of that, just as people see the need. And but that will be our basic level of expectation for cleanliness and disinfecting the vehicles. We know that if we don't sweep them, disinfecting doesn't go well. So we need to make sure that we do that in that order. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I just wanted to clarify, the 9th graders are going to continue to use Metro buses.
We're going to talk about Metro in a minute. So that when Eric has that small window, that's for special education students.
Appreciate it. I guess the other question was just more about capacity. You know, given the social distancing and limiting one child per seat, I just wonder what are our limitations? How are we using the survey data to guesstimate how many children we're going to be transporting, or I just want to know logistically how limited we are by the number of buses we have.
Yeah, and I can send you the document that we've built. We've also done some modeling on scheduling to see what the numbers would break down as, and so we can give you that also. I'll deliver that to you guys afterwards.
I think, Eric touched on this, but it might be helpful to just underscore it for a second. I think that, when he says that the 7:45 arrival time, that could potentially be 7:25 for some students and 7:45 for some other students. So there will be instances where buses will need to make 2 runs in their same territory to be able to meet those loading requirements on the buses. So I think that that's part of what it's important for you to understand, is that it may not be that like the bus leaves the depot, it picks up kids and it drops off those kids at a school and then goes off to the next set of runs. It might be that they do that, they do another run for that same school, and then after they drop off that second run, then they'll go off and start their next round of school. So they'll start the 8:30, the 8:25, 8:45 schools. So not in every instance. I think it will depend on the distancing, the number of siblings, the total number of students on that route. But that's been built. Those times that we shared with you, the 7:45, 8:45, 9:45, assumes enough time so that they can do 2 runs within their routes. Is that accurate, Eric?
Yep. So I'm going to put some numbers in our box here. And so, absolutely. So we're going to be probably doing 2 circles in those neighborhoods, that's why we gave ourselves an hour between bell times, just to make sure that we could cover the footprint of those neighborhoods super well. But if you look at these basic numbers, if we're looking at 1 student per seat, the vans are limited extremely. So we've been doing some reallocating of those students. But a minibus can fit approximately 7 students. So there would be approximately 7 rows of seats. 4 rows of seats. They're very small, so that would be only 7 students on there. The mid-sized vehicles we have would take it up just 2 students. And again, we don't fill these buses as they are. These buses move around in a larger footprint of the city. But when you start moving to the special education buses and the full-size buses is where you see the change in numbers. But our special education buses can still fit 13 to 15 students based on their size. Those ranges are that we have different lift buses that have different size capacities or more seats available to them. And then the full-size buses also have a range of capacity of 23 to 27 if we only put 1 student per seat and we leave out the seat behind the driver to give them more space and protection. So, but we have that all broken down at a different level with how many students specifically are available to come to school, like at the elementary level, which kind of gives you a better sight of all of that, a better view. So that's our basic understanding of how we're going to have to build our routes. And I think the bigger windows of coming and circling back are going to be namely used for full-size buses, and quite possibly the special education buses, depending on the amount of students. So that's where we'll be doing those circle arounds, or we'll do one part of the footprint of Portland, drop those students off, come back and do the other footprint of that for the school system. And I think we're going to be in good shape. I'm really thankful that we got to spend a lot of time over the last few months talking about this. I feel like as best we can, we're being above reproach, but we're also giving our drivers and assistants enough time to not scramble to make them either more fearful or nervous in trying to rush through the city. So
On that note, can you talk a little bit about staffing? Or I guess maybe we should stop and make sure, see if there are any other questions about the loads, the routes, and the cleaning protocols before we move on to staffing. Good to go? All right. So talk a little bit about availability of staff and substitutes.
yeah, so I mean, on our staffing, we're in a really good spot right now. That doesn't mean we're going to necessarily be in a great spot in a month from now when we see the needs that we have. And with the way this season has changed, you know, from day to day or week to week or month to month. And so we are pretty much at full capacity, about 50 staff right now. We just hired a new driver to fill a gap of a retiree. And so I believe that at this current level, we can cover the needs of the district for how we're looking at reopening. But I would say that we're looking to add 3 to 4 extra drivers to fill in the gaps just based on the way the season's gone. People are out, unable to work, or the needs stretch because of red or yellow or green. And so I think having additional staff available to be trained and to be helpful is going to go a long way. So that's something that we're talking about at an elementary level to figure out. But we have an amazing staff, and I don't know what it's going to look like yet. I think that's one of those big question marks, but I do believe we have a great group of people. That my goal when I look at the schedule is to have them serve the district as great as possible, but make sure we're serving them as best as possible at the same time. So
the substitutes, Eric, how do you handle that? And what are your plans?
On the substitute drivers, yeah, we have a handful of substitutes. Luckily, all of our office is licensed. And so all of the folks that are in management or myself as a director, we can all step into the holes as substitutes. And then we have 2 float positions that are also substitutes. So that's a total of 5 people at a minimum level that can fill gaps. But we've also been training new hirees that were bus driver trainees. So we have more drivers than we've had before because of that. So I believe that we have about 7 people to 9 people, depending on if some of our spares come back, that we'll be able to fill in gaps with.
Any questions about staffing and transportation? Ms. Figdor? You're muted.
Sorry. You think I'd figure that out, get the mute thing down by now. I think, you know, to Eric and the superintendent, it wasn't long ago where I remember that staffing was such a challenge in our transportation department. So it just seems incredible to be at this point. And I just want to reflect on the work that it's taken to get here. And Eric, your leadership. So, and, you know, I'm reading about other Maine districts and how this issue is an additional challenge continues to be a real challenge for them as school reopening plans move forward. So kudos to you for your leadership and hard work.
Thank you. I think we've had a great team from downtown to our department, but I would say that this is why probably having more people ready to go is important, just because of the way this season is. So I don't think that, I remember Javier and I talking several months ago, just because we're looking good now doesn't mean we'll be good tomorrow. So I think it's always a changing situation that we need to be ready for, but I appreciate that encouragement. I would say on that note, one of the things looking at the scheduling is that we used to have 3 to 4 hours to reset with some midday trips. Right now, we're looking at 2 hours in the middle of the day from 10:15 to 12:15. And we still have responsibilities in the middle of the day. So we'll have mail delivery, some meal delivery, and then we have vehicle deep cleaning going on. And so my plan is to have them each have a minimum of an hour break, because I don't want to see them burn out. There's a good chance that many of them will start at 6:15 in the morning and end at 4:15 in the afternoon. And so if there's no break, there's a good chance that we're going to burn people out pretty quick. So just so everyone knows, I would fight to protect that middle of the day as best we can so that we don't burn out too fast. These people are going to be the front lines and the back lines at the same time. So just a heads up on that one.
Mr. Burke?
Yeah, thank you. Support you on that, Eric. Just curious if you could say any of the plans around protocols for students wearing face coverings and kind of the enforcement side of things, what the conversation is currently about that.
Yeah, we're still working through that. I think it's a very interesting conversation, right? Because we don't want to scold students for all of that. So I think that there's going to be a lot of conversations. I'm grateful that when we have one student per seat, that does change the culture of a bus, dramatically. When you're 2 to 3 kids per seat, there's a way different vibe that goes on than the one per seat or row. So I'm hopeful that that's going to be helpful. I also think on some of our buses, we're going to have assistants that can be a friendly reminder. I do think that if we end up getting to hire some of these additional staff members, that we can use them in those roles. And I'd rather be proactive than reactive. So if we can have a friendly reminder before there's discipline, that would be great. And I think discipline all the way around is a question mark for the bus going forward, just simply because there's going to be all these new questions that people are having to think through when they get up out of their seat as a driver, and then they walk through the aisleway and all of that. So I don't think we have a great answer for that yet, just to be honest. But I appreciate that question. We'll be pining away trying to figure that out.
And I just want to, I know that you've heard this at the board meeting. This is, we've got to approach this as a, education and public health approach, and have, people understand, all of our families understand why this is important. I will say that we are very fortunate that the state has, made it into not an option, not not a choice, but rather a requirement, and specific about what are the alternatives to face masks. So I think at the end of the day, we always can come back and rest on that. So, but again, that would mean saying to somebody, you can't ride the bus because you can't keep your face mask on. So I think, obviously starting from a public health perspective, having that student, having their family understand the importance of the mask is something that is not only, that's protecting all of us, and that's, that's our collective charge, is going to be the only way that we can get through this. We can't just get through this by kicking people off that, that don't understand, the why it's important to do that. And at the same time, understand that, that it is a requirement. It is something that, we can't function if people aren't wearing their mask. Okay, if there are no other staff questions, then just a quick hit on crossing guards and Metro. Maybe it won't be that quick a hit, but that's crossing guards and Metro.
Yeah, crossing guards and Metro. So crossing guards have been a hard one. I'm sure that you guys have had to bump up against over the last several years. We had all city management jump in the gap a few years ago, and they're going to be doing that again. And so that contract has just been finalized. But I do believe that we have a pretty good running relationship with their management and leadership. So we're going to spend some more time over the next month clarifying what that will actually look like. And so I would say one, we've updated them on the estimated start date, telling them that we don't have any official dates on that, but here's the approximate, and then also an approximate schedule has been given to them as far as the times, the possible times that students will be coming to school, so they can begin to think through scheduling. And then we're going to work on adapting some of our crossing guard sites just to help increase the safety of walkers, because we know that the season's going to increase not only parental transportation, but also walking to school or walking school buses. And so we're going to work on some adaptation of what those sites will look like, so that we can protect and serve students at a better level. And that's where we're at with that. They're ready.
Have they reported on their staffing? Are they concerned about finding crossing guards?
I wouldn't say concerned is the way they sounded today. I would say that they're going back to everybody that was working up to March and making sure and checking in to see who's available. But we have changed some of the contract so that we can pay people more appropriately, which I think makes it more attractive at that level. And then the encouragement of, like, you're serving the city, you're serving students, you're serving families. This may seem like a mediocre job, but it's a very valuable job. So I think both lines are being connected and used for hiring, but they didn't seem fearful of their hiring.
And Metro?
Metro. So they reported last week that they're going to be running under the assumption early September that they will be allowing a 30 person max on their vehicles. And so at this point they're at 20, but they're going to be moving to 30 in September. And they're also going to send us their cleaning protocols so that we can better understand them, so that we're also able to answer questions of how Metro is being above reproach. But they're doing very similar look as we are throughout the day. They're taking care of all the touch points and wiping down in between routes, and then doing deep cleaning throughout the night. And so they assured us that they would send us that information more clearly so that we can communicate it more appropriately. Does that make sense on that?
Yeah, and face masks.
Yep, and drivers will be wearing face masks, and also those that ride will be wearing face masks. And then do you want me to go on just how they're going to be working through the apps or not?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. We have a lot, and it's not really germane to reopen. They are switching over to their new fare system, which will be a hefty increase in costs for us. And as part of that, they're moving to a different way of collecting fares, which will be good from a data perspective, but obviously cost more. All right, any questions on crossing guards or Metro before we move into the food service discussion? Eric, thank you.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
All right, so food service, Jane McLucas, our distinguished director, is here to, there you go, raise the roof. Talk a little bit about how food service is going to work, sort of go into how it's going to work for students who are remote, and then to the extent that we can, try to talk about revenue implications for everything that we're doing. So, Jane. You're mute. Emily will coach you on that later.
So during the summer, we've been operating each day under the summer food service program with waivers that allow us to operate in the current capacity. Parents can pick up. We've been doing meal service delivery. The waivers for that program end on August 31st. And then when we go back to school on September 14th, we'll be operating under the National School Lunch Program. the National School Lunch Program is going to require us to charge again for meals. Meals will no longer be free as they have been since last March. So families need to make sure that they turn in their free and reduced applications, which they'll see in their mailbox, hopefully by the end of next week is the deadline for us to get those out to families. And they will be charged on a free, reduced, or paid level benefit based on what they've submitted to the school department. There is currently a bill in the House called the Pandemic Child Hunger Prevention Act. This bill would allow us to continue to operate under the summer food service program. But I am currently not optimistic that this will get through the House before the start of school. So we're going to plan on operating under the National School Lunch Program. The plan currently right now is that Central Kitchen will provide all the meals for pre-K through 8. We will send out bulk breakfast snack items and bag lunches for distribution into the elementary and the middle schools. The high schools will make and serve their own meals, as well as provide for Casco Bay meals. Staff at the school will package into the individual units so that each student will receive a unitized meal that then they will distribute into the classroom. Accountability for this program in order to get the reimbursement will be a priority, and we'll need to rely on the classroom staff to be accountable for this task for us. Each meal service will need a roster filled out so that food services can then report the meals served by category to the state. So food service staff will deliver each of the meals and they'll be rung in. We will also be providing a snack in the classroom as well as a breakfast. And that's gonna approximately cost 75 cents because it does not fall under the National School Lunch Program at a cost of about $1,500 a day based on the current model. So all meals will be served in the classroom at the elementary and middle school levels, and lunches will be handed out grab and go at the end of the school day. The high schools will be served breakfast in the cafeteria when they will come down with social distancing. They'll receive their breakfast and then they will return to their classrooms. And then lunch will be available to them in the cafeteria on their way home. So they can stop into the cafeteria to receive the meals on their way home. For remote learners, we are going to set up meal pickup locations at the 3 high schools, as well as Talbot Elementary. We've chosen those schools because the students, the remote learners, will be going to the high schools for Learning Academy, as well as the timing of the availability to minimize the amount of students at the schools. So the pickup times will be from 1 to 2 o'clock at the 3 high schools and then at Talbot Elementary. Students, we do have a waiver for allowed a parent pickup at those meal sites, but they will have to report the student name and ID number in order for us to be able to track them. Meals would only be available for Portland Public School students. Over the summer, we've been able to offer meals to siblings, but that will no longer be the case because it's the National School Lunch Program. We will have to, they are only available to students of the Portland Public Schools. For those remote learners who are designated as high need and approved on an individual basis, transportation has agreed to help us with a minimal amount of buses to be able to do delivery for students who do strictly remote learning so that they can have a delivery schedule that will be available Monday through Friday. So we'll be able to work with transportation to deliver those meals to families who are not able to get to those sites. We'll also provide services for wraparound care for the recreation program on Wednesdays at the 3 community centers Riverton East End, and Reiki. We'll provide meals for them during the day under the National School Lunch Program as well. We'll use rosters in all the schools, and we'll have sneeze guards set up in the cafeterias at the high schools for the cashiers to use as well. Okay. Javier, what did I miss? You're muted now too.
Yep. We both need to go to remedial unmuting classes. So the period of time between now, between September 1st and the first day of school.
So that there currently is a gap of service. Because the waivers end, we would be able to offer summer meal program, but we would not have any of the waivers. So it would require that all the students came to the site and stayed on the site and ate their lunch on the site, which we don't want to promote congregation. So the only other way we could do that would be, we could still offer meals, but we wouldn't get reimbursed.
Did you
So,
estimate the cost of that?
yeah, so currently we are collecting about $5,000 a day in reimbursement from the federal government. So for those 9 days of service, it would be about $45,000. We would continue to feed, we're currently feeding about 800 kids a day between the bus service and the meal pickup sites. That's a decision that we still need to make.
Ms. Victor?
Will we be considering the broader budget options and choices at the Finance Committee on Thursday? Or is this committee have purview over, input on that decision?
That is part of the agenda for the Finance Committee on Thursday, is to review what we are envisioning spending the additional money on. So this would be a part of that conversation.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Victor? I don't see any other board members.
If we're doing questions, I thought we were just asking a clarifying question. But, hi, Jane. Good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for feeding everybody. One of my questions was, if we're in a remote-only state, how does that affect food service?
Currently, the plan right now would be to revert back to what we were doing in the fall, in the spring, and we would open those remote sites. In the new model, we would still be operating under the National School Lunch Program because it would be remote school, and we would still be collecting PIN numbers and IDs from the students at those sites. So that would be the difference. And I have not discussed, but I presume in our all remote site that Eric would help out, transportation would help out with remote delivery again, if that was the case, for an extended period of time. If it was a short period of time, we would just end up doing the pickup sites again.
So I just want to make sure, Mr. Burke, that you understand the difference between what we were able to do in the spring and what we will be able to do in the fall if we are in all remote. I think the change between the National School Lunch Program versus the summer program is very important, because that means that a large number of people that were, able to get meals during, March through today will not have access to that.
Yeah, and to clarify further, it could be a mix of they're not eligible because they don't meet the eligibility guidelines, or it could be that they're not eligible because they don't complete the paperwork necessary to be eligible, correct?
And in any case, for example, now, so yes to that. So the answer to that is correct. And in addition to that, we've been able to feed families without consideration for, whether they were Portland Public Schools families or Portland resident families or, any of that. And that will no longer be possible once we switch into the National School Lunch Program.
Yes, understood. And that policy is coming from the feds or from the state that allows us to operate in one mode versus the other? Could you clarify?
Federal.
Federal, okay. And then could you just clarify at the elementary and middle schools? I got a little confused. And we don't have our Post-its to clarify the journey map here of how this all works, but you said the teachers would be a key element of accountability for reimbursement, but then I thought I understood that meals would be picked up, breakfast and lunch would be picked up in the cafeteria. So no, I misunderstood. Yeah, okay.
Breakfast and lunch would be delivered to the classroom, and then we would ask the teacher to be the accountable person to check off the roster for the meals for the kids that were served.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Burke, are you good?
Just one other question. Just curious what since we did such good work to advance the menu, and I know things have been different in remote settings, would there still be the daily plant-based option and the daily carne option within your plans for the coming year, or would that be different?
At this point in time, we'll do a vegetarian option and a carne option. But I will have to say that we have been using some of our plant-based options on a regular basis within the different menu cycles that we've been using. So there's been quite a few more people eating plant-based, whether they knew it or not.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Figdor.
Thank you. I'm wondering about for the elementary schools that start later. So I believe it's a 8:45 start. Take home lunches is going to be pretty late. Is it 2:30?
1:30 is the dismissal.
1:30 is dismissal.
1:30. I guess I was, yeah. Okay, so is that our latest dismissal? No, it's later for the middle schools.
Later for the middle schools. So then, we're doing breakfast, we're doing a substantial snack, and then they're bringing their meals with them when they leave. And I also, I think we've gone around and around, but I think it's important to sort of explain this. We are reducing the schedule significantly. So, students will be with us for 4 hours and 45 minutes. And so that is, that is the rationale, to have a 30-minute lunch period with the additional complication of, the how to feed students, when we're in full back, makes it that is a preferred option.
And will we adequately prepare families for ensuring, for adjusting to, a much later lunch? Because that it seems quite significant for especially younger kids to eat later. I mean, I fully understand the rationale.
It'll be part of our communication, and so much of all of this is, communicating this and communicating why we're doing what we're doing, and how, having people understand this is, this is a pandemic. Nobody wanted to be here. We don't think it's ideal for kids to walk out with their lunch at 1:30, but given the circumstances and our choices, that's where we landed.
Thank you.
Jane, do you have anything else?
I don't.
Okay.
Good.
So that is basically all that we had on the agenda for today. What we wanted to do was to sort of go deep and answer some of the questions that were raised. I'm sorry, we did say that we were going to go back and look at the board meeting questions. So the transportation, we answered that. We did not, I think I screwed up. I was also planning to have Tina here, and she was here on Thursday, and then I never circled back with her. So we will need to create another opportunity, probably Tuesday at the board meeting, to sort of go deep on some of these other questions about the health protocols, health and safety protocols. So we'll skip through that. So the next question that I highlighted is around facilities, windows at other schools besides the high school, and question about Riverton, and then question about asbestos and fan circulation. So Steve and Doug, can you guys tackle those questions? So windows at other schools besides the high schools. And obviously Longfellow we've talked about, so the 100 and some windows are for those 3 schools. Everywhere else there are windows and they work. You're muted, Steve.
Sorry
A
again.
large class.
Sorry again, you know. Yes, windows throughout the districts were all looked at in every room, every space by the custodial staff and maintenance staff to determine whether they were operable. And then we charted that on our plan. So if they weren't designated to be replaced in this go around, then I feel confident that these windows open. Now, at Riverton was a little different for me as well, in that the section of the newer pods, they don't have operable windows, but they have a door. So when we scored those and I got feedback, I didn't quickly, mentally enough, put 2 and 2 together that there was a door. So we've talked to Riverton staff, and I'm talking to our window installer now to see what the feasibility and maybe a screen door, a storm door, or we're even looking at possibly taking a panel out, Javier, and taking the opportunity to mount a air conditioning unit there that would feed those.
So it will be the ability to bring in outside air at Riverton.
Yeah, they can bring in outside air, and they are ventilated. They are mechanically ventilated. And the other question,
asbestos and fan circulation. I'm not 100% sure these were Sarah's questions. I don't.
We have no asbestos that I'm aware of that's being circulated by fans. I can't even draw context to even our equipment that would be insulated with any kind of asbestos insulation. So I'm not really certain how to answer that.
So there is no, so if fans are running and the building has asbestos, it's no different from the fans aren't running and the building has asbestos.
Yeah, asbestos needs to be broken up, say in a VTC floor, if there were particles on the floor that could be sucked up into a fan vortex and spread around the room, and it's in the air and you could breathe it, then you'll be breathing asbestos particles. But there's no immediate exposures to asbestos in our buildings. You would have to break up the tile. You'd have to crumble the ceiling. You would have to, and specifically to our most needy school, which would be Longfellow. So we are not ventilating with any kind of hazardous materials around.
Great. We talked about the facilities improvements, costs for improvements. We really, you gave an estimate, I think, for some of the costs, but maybe just go a little bit deeper into that. And I see Doug also has his hand up.
Yeah, I just thought, speaking to what we have outstanding on the ionizers or the plasma generators, again, it was roughly $750 install per unit ventilator. There were 36 unit ventilators we were moving to install, and that would have been in the neighborhood of $70,000. But in that, included in that, is a relook at the air, the RTU that was at one time decommissioned for heating. It still ventilates the air components, and the fan, the dampers are all in operation for providing ventilation, but not the ability to heat that ventilated air in the winter. So in that 70,000 was an estimate, just an estimate right now to replace that unit with a 30-ton unit that would replace that unit, that would provide heat in the winter, as well as being a new unit to provide ventilation. And it would be a unit that, Javier, we could use in the renovation, so it could be spec to be used in the new renovation. So it would be a waste of money. Now I'm trying to get that part of it going as well. But immediately, our immediate concern is to get Reiki the ionizers in their ventilators, and then scale up to the other schools on availability of the ionizers themselves, and then to appropriately through the non-digitalized schools, installing them in ventilators in schools like, of course, all of our King older schools. So, but the cost to do Reiki with the ionizers in the univents and in the 4 main trunks to the cafeteria, library, pool, and locker rooms, that's where the major ventilation goes, and the admin RTU that we'll be replacing the larger ionizers. So Reiki first.
And maybe we should probably just have more sort of detailed cost analysis for the finance committee on Thursday.
I was hoping to have it today. He called, he's still trying to get verification of the numbers that he could actually purchase through the supply outside. And so hopefully tomorrow I'll have a better look at them. It may be less.
Just to follow up on that, given that some of those system improvements would be to the community center aspects of our parts of our schools, I wonder if there's an opportunity for the city to help out on those costs.
Well, yeah, we can have that conversation. I know they helped us, they participated in the new sign at Talbot, so yeah. And you know, it makes sense, and if you can put these in the main distribution trunks, and we're going to move in that pathway with Reiki in a full sense. It's just better protection, better air quality, indoor air quality. So the unit for that would be $1,300 roughly.
So we talked about Metro and their safety protocols. We've talked about the custodial schedules. There was a question about extra compensation for custodians. We're not entertaining that at this point, other than overtime.
Right, that's correct.
Then timing, several health and safety. This is from Mr. Burke. Do all of our elementary students fit in our buildings in the 5-day-a-week plan? And then realistic to have the audit of spaces and numbers. So we actually have, right? That's been completed. So Doug, you have that at this point?
I do have the last package that the principals verified, but we're doing a new iteration this week to address Mr. Burke's question very specifically. What furniture would we need to make all of our spaces, viable for full loading? Because many of our spaces, even at the high school level, but more so at the elementary level, we have tables that are used as a collaborative space for students, 4 per table. And the best we're going to do in this early version of COVID is to have 2 students per table with a screen. So a lot of those rooms may need desks as opposed to tables to make it work. And we're pursuing what might be available, what the pricing might look like to do that. But I don't have all the numbers yet. Hope to get them tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you for looking into that. And as you've said before, Superintendent, these are not the ideal circumstances. In some places, there are regressions to things that we had been happy to leave behind, and just got to express a little bit of grief in terms of grieving, not grief towards any decision you're making, but grieving of what's being lost in these times.
And I think that's all I see on this list at this point from all the things that we highlighted. And I've been fairly liberal going through and just thinking that we've already addressed those. So if you see something that you feel like you still want addressed, we're happy to do that before we adjourn.
Just to clarify, Superintendent, some of the health and safety ones you're pushing to another time. Yeah, okay, great.
We will build that into our workshop on Tuesday.
And can I, real quick, did we say that we're gonna get, how are we gonna get the information back on the timeline of the like the UV lamps and the ionizers? Did we say we were gonna get something more formal of how that information is?
Roberto, we're calling every day on the delivery slip.
Right. No. And I don't mean for the board to get into the day-to-day things like that, but just kind of like a chart of, we talked about this, like an overview of where and what is going to be installed. Just wanted to recap that we're going to get that.
Yes.
Because that is sprinkled throughout the questions, just like that.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So unless you have anything else, we can adjourn.
Just want to share gratitude. I know how much care and thought you all are putting into everything, and how many details you're looking at over and over and over again. So thank you.
These guys are working, nonstop, and it's huge, like the depth at which they're working to sort of understand the details around each of these areas is huge, and I couldn't be prouder of this operations team. They've been great. Okay, I guess we should probably have a motion to adjourn. There's 2 of you, Mr. Burke, and seconded by Ms. Figdor. All in favor? Awesome.
Thank you so much to everyone. Really appreciate all the information tonight and all of your hard work.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.